Hi everybody, just wanted to say hello, good morning. I hope everybody got the video that Mr. Strongsling had created for you guys that explains everything that we sent home. But I know that you guys have been anxious for where the red fern grows, and I know that we left off in a good spot. I'm gonna find the next good spot to leave off again. But I wanted to let you guys meet Petey Pie. Here he is. Petey, say hi. Hi everybody. He wanted to be in the video with me, so there he is. I'll send you more videos about him later, but he's just tired. He just woke up too. All right, so where the red fern grows. Here you go, Pete. Okay. So last we left off, we had a really good spot going, and I believe we weren't quite sure if he was going to be able to win that cup or not. Okay. I think I need my glasses. You guys know that, right? Alright, here's my at-home cheater glasses. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Call them off, I said. Why you couldn't whip them off with a stick? There's no use for anyone to get scared. They know exactly what they's doing. I've seen this more times than one. Grandpa was scared and excited. He was jumping up and down, whooping and a-hollering. Papa raised the gun to aim. I jumped and grabbed his arm. Don't do that, I yelled. Papa, you're sure to hit one of my dogs. Round and round on the deep water that fight went on, and the coon climbed up on old Dan's head and sank his teeth into one of his long, tender ears. Old Dan bawled with pain, and little Ann swam in and caught one of the coon's hind legs in her mouth. She tried hard to pull him off, and all three disappeared under the water, and I held my breath. The water churned and boiled, and all three came to the top about the same time. The coon was between the bank where we're standing on and my dogs. He swam toward us, and they caught him again just as he reached the shore. He fought his way free and ran for a large sycamore tree, but old Dan caught him just as he started up. I knew that was the end of the fight. I just knew it. After it was all over and the coon had been skinned, Grandpa said, I hope you don't have to go through that again tonight, for well, I sure thought your dogs was goners. The judge said, Will, have you ever seen that? Look it over there. Old Dan was standing perfectly still with his eyes closed and head hanging down. Little Ann was licking at his cut and bleeding ears. She always does that, I said. If you watch him, wait till he gets done with him. He'll do the same for her. We stood and watched until they had finished doctoring each other up, and then trotting side by side, they disappeared into the darkness. We followed along, stopping now and then to listen. The next chapter is chapter 17. Looking at the sky, Papa said, That doesn't look good up there. I think we're in for a storm. The sky had turned to dark gray, and fast-moving clouds was rolling through the heavens. Grandpa said, Looks like we're going to get some wind, too. Scared and thinking everyone might want to stop hunting because of the few clouds, I said, If a storm is brewing, it's a good night to hunt. All game stirs just before a storm. 30 minutes later, Papa said, Shh, listen. We stood still, and a low moaning sound could be heard in the tops of the tall sycamore trees. Grandpa said, well, I was afraid of that. We're going to get some wind. I just knew it. We heard a rattling in the leaves and the underbrush, and it was beginning to sleet. The air turned cold and chilly. From far downriver, we heard the deep baying of a hound on a trail. I knew it was old Dan. Seconds later, the rhythmic crying of little Ann could be heard too. Swallowing that lump that had jumped up in my throat, I whooped as loud as I could. The ground was turning white with sleet. The storm had really set in, and we hurried along. I said to Papa, if this keeps up, that old coon ain't going to run long. He's going to be headed for his den. If it gets much worse, Grandpa said, I know some coon hunters that won't be running very long. They'll be frozen too stiff to run. The judge asked if there was any danger of getting lost. I don't know, Papa said. It's all strange country to me. My dog's voices sounded far away, and I knew they were much closer than they sounded as they was downwind from us. Finding 3 large sycamores grown close together, we stopped on the leeward side. Papa shouted above the wind, I don't know if we can take much more of this. It is bad, Grandpa replied, and it looks like it's going to get worse. You can't see over 15 feet now, the judge said. Do you think we can even find our buggy? I think we can find the buggy all right, Papa said. I could no longer hear the voices of my dogs, though. This had me worried, and I didn't want to leave them out in no storm. Can anyone hear the hounds, Grandpa asked. I can't, Papa shouted. The judge spoke up. Fellas, I think we better get going, he said. There's no telling where they is. They may have crossed the river already. Scared knowing I had to do something, I said, they're closer than you think, guys. Probably treed by now. You can't hear them for this wind. I begged, please, let's go farther. There was no reply, and no one made a move to leave the shelter of the trees. Taking a few steps, I said, I'll take the lead. Just follow me. Billy, We couldn't find him. Papa said, you can't see or hear a thing. We'd better start back for camp right now. I think so too, the judge said. At this remark, I cried, I've been out in storms like this before, all by myself. I've never left my dogs in the woods, Pa, never, and I ain't going to start now, even if I have to look for 'em myself. No one answered. Please, please, I begged, just a little farther. I just know we'll hear 'em. Still no one spoke or made a move to go on. Stepping over to my Pa, I buried my face in his whole mackinaw coat. Sobbing, I pleaded with him not to turn back. He patted my head. Billy, he said, a man can freeze to death in this storm, and besides, your dogs will give up and come on in. That's what has me worried, I said. They ain't gonna come in, Pa, they won't. Little Ann might, but not old Dan. He'd die before he'd leave a coon in a tree. Papa was undecided, making up his mind. He stepped away from the tree and said to the others, Well, I'm going on with him. You fellers coming, or are you heading back? He turned and followed me. Grandpa and the judge fell in behind him. By this time, the ground was covered with the thin white layer of sleet, and we kept slipping and falling. I could hear Grandpa mumbling and grumbling, and the wind driving sleet stung our skin like thousands of prickling needles. Strong gusts of winds growled and moaned through the tops of the tall timber. Once, during a momentary lull in the storm, I thought I heard the baying of my hounds. I told my Pa I thought I heard old Dan. From which direction, he asked. That way, I said, pointing to our left. We started on. A few minutes later, Papa stopped, and he shouted to Grandpa, Did you hear anything? No, Grandpa shouted back. I can't hear nothing in this storm. I thought I did, but I ain't sure, the judge said. Where's it coming from? Papa shouted. Over that way, the judge said, pointing to our right. That's the way it sounded to me, Papa said. And at that moment, all of us heard the deep voice of old Dan. It sounds like they're pretty close, Grandpa said. Let's split up, said the judge. Maybe one of us can find them. No, Papa said. It ain't going to be easy, and we're going to get lost in this storm. I think the more to the right of us, I said. I think that way. I do too, Papa said. We trudged on, and old Dan bawled again. The sound of his voice seemed to be all around us. The way the wind is whipping the sound through this timber, the judge said. We'd be lucky if we ever find them. Papa shouted over the roar of the wind. We can't take much more. We're going to freeze to death. The men were giving up, and I felt the knot again as it crawled up in my throat. Salt water froze on my eyelashes, and kneeling down, I put my ear close to the icy ground in hopes I could hear my dogs. But I couldn't hear nothing above the roar of the blizzard. Standing up, I peered this way and that, and all I could see was a wall of white, whirling sweet sleep. I closed my eyes and said a silent prayer, and I hoped for a miracle. We heard a sharp crack and a loud crashing noise, and a large limb torn from a tree by the strong wind fell to the ground. The sharp crack of that limb gave me the idea, and shouting to my Pa, I said, Shoot the gun, Pa! If my dogs is close enough to hear it, maybe little Ann will come a-running. Pa didn't hesitate. Pointing the gun high over his head, he pulled that trigger. A sharp crack rang out into the teeth of the storm, and we waited. Just when I had given up all hope and had sunk to the lowest depths of despair, out of the white wall of driving sleep, my little dog came to me. I knelt down and gathered her in my arms. Taking one of them lead ropes from my pocket, I tied her collar, and I said, Find him, little Ann, find him. Please find old Dan. Get going. Right then, I didn't care about coons. I didn't care about nothing. Gold cups, nothing. All I wanted was my dogs. I didn't know how she did it. Straight into the fierce storm she led us. Time after time, she would stop and turn her head this way and that, and I knew she couldn't see nothing. Instinct alone was guiding her. Over a winding and twisting trail we followed. Coming out of the bottoms, she led us into a thick canebrake, and the tall stalks sheltered us from the storm. The roaring of the wind didn't seem as loud, and like ghostly figures, large trees loomed out, almost solid mass. Falling and stumbling, we kept pushing on. Grandpa shouted, Hold up a minute, I just about all in. We stopped. Don't think that hound knows what she's doing, he said. Maybe we're just running around in circles. Looking at me, Papa said, I hope she does. Some of these canebrakes cover miles. If we get lost in here, Billy, we're going to be in bad shape. Grandpa said, I think we've gone too far. The last time I heard old Dan, he sounded quite close. That's because of the wind carrying him, I said. The judge spoke up. Fellas, no dog is worth the lives of 3 men. Now let's do the smart thing and get out of here while we still can. Our clothes is wet. If we keep on wandering around in this jungle, we's going to freeze to death. Don't look like this blizzard's going to give up. I could hear the roar of the blizzard back in the thick timber of the bottoms, and 2 large limbs being rubbed together by the strong wind made a grinding, creaking sound. The tall slender came around us and rattled and swayed. I could feel the silence closing in. I knew the judge's cold logic had its effect on my Pa and my grandpa. The men had given up. There was no hope left. Kneeling down, I put my arms around little Ann. I felt the warm heat from her moist tongue caressing my ear, and closed my eyes. I said, "Please, Dan, just one more time, bawl for me. Please, just one more time." And that's where we're going to stop.